This is a message of hope amidst a pandemic that is challenging humanity. Let's seize this unique opportunity to recast our ways of caring and sharing, to invest in education at a scale never seen, to make a pact, a new social contract for everyone so keen. Let's reimagine our world to find lasting solutions. This is our chance for a greener future. Together, growing minds and nature, let's adapt learning to meet everyone's needs, with technology to power teachers and learners, no matter where they are, planting new seeds. Together, we can transform education to fulfill the potential of every generation, leaving no one behind in a world where every voice matters.
Is this video still going? I was told to wait for the video to finish. Okay. Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, I'm pleased to introduce the Ministerial Roundtable. I'm Jamie Frost, a teacher at Tiffin School in London and founder of an educational charity, Dots Cross Learning. In this next segment, we will continue to hear how the transformation of education will take place on the ground in countries through a series of ministerial statements. As we are all aware, COVID has a profound impact on education globally. Schools and governments had to adapt to the challenging circumstances of the lockdowns themselves, but even where schools were able to make basic provision, there was a profound impact on students in terms of lost learning, where without appropriate remediation, we risk long-term effects on both a societal and economic level. But this conference also gives an opportunity to explore ways in which governments can propose and adopt novel policies to radically shape education. As someone who's spent most of my career in education, I would argue that education is the backbone on which almost everything else rests and underpins all of UNESCO's values in how we can equip students to make contributions both nationally and internationally. Education enables students to appreciate and contribute to our rich cultures. The values instilled by schools shape global democracy, and the skills they equip with catalyze both scientific and economic progress. I will be inviting each minister to give a 3-minute intervention to share the country's perspectives on education and their commitments in advance to the Transformation Education Summit in September. They will be focusing on 3 questions: the recovery steps the country has taken in the wake of COVID. Secondly, how education in their country should be transformed to shape peaceful, prosperous, just, and sustainable futures. And lastly, the practical and financial commitments required to undertake this change. Please note there are reserved seats at the front of the room for all speakers and their +1. On the screen behind me, you can see the list of speakers in the order they will be making their statements. I ask speakers to make their way to the stage in good time before their statement, as we have a rather packed agenda. I will now ask our first ministers to join me on stage. I call on the distinguished ministers of Bahrain, Benin, Bolivia, Comoros, Jordan, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The list of countries is Bahrain, Benin, Bolivia, Comoros, Jordan, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It is a pleasure to introduce the first speaker, the Distinguished Minister of Education in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Please make your way to the lectern.
مساء الخير. السلام عليكم.
I greet you all. In fact, this pre-summit is very important for us because it's happening so that we may review our policies on education in light of COVID-19. The preparation of this meeting, of this pre-summit, happened in my country with the different bodies concerned which participate in these international efforts. We all know, in fact, that the pandemic, COVID-19, had negative effects on practically all countries in the world, including my country, Bahrain. We made many efforts so as to deal as well as possible with the effects of this pandemic. We had already undertaken reforms in professional education and technical education. And after that, we entered into a new era, if you will. We began with technological reforms, by which I mean digitalization of our teaching methods. And during the pandemic, we saw that many students could no longer go to school and could no longer take advantage of instruction. That's why we followed up on the two reforms that I've just mentioned, but we also added to those reforms several other units which were administered digitally and concentrated on the way in which we could proceed with education in spite of the pandemic. We set forth a digital platform which was visited by more than 130 million people. And we also took advantage of audiovisual resources in our country so as to broadcast, more specifically using 14 channels entirely dedicated to teaching, considerable educational content, including technical and professional training and teaching. Thanks to these efforts, we were widely thanked and encouraged by different partners and other countries for having done all this during the pandemic. We also received a prize from the neighboring brother country of Kuwait, the Sheikh Sabah Prize for teaching. We are obviously at UNESCO's side, and we support UNESCO and all the efforts it makes to continue all of the reforms that have been undertaken in teaching. We are also ready and committed to participate in the summit on transforming teaching. I would also like to say to what extent we attach importance to the need to digitalize our education so as to respond to all of the challenges that we face.
Minister of Nursery and Primary Education in Benin.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, I should like, first of all, to thank you for the excellent initiative that this pre-summit represents. It gives our countries the possibility to present the results of their national consultations and to discuss their commitment for the transformation of education before the summit, which will take place in New York in September. Before the summit, the Benin government organized national consultations which involved local groups for education and everyone concerned, including representatives of civil society. These consultations allowed us to take stock of the situation and identify activities to be undertaken so that SDG in 2030 could be reached, and also so as to succeed with the challenge that the government has undertaken, which is to make education an important lever for the transformation of the economy of Benin. And it happens that in spite of encouraging results we've seen with the policies implemented for several years in favor of education, a policy which inter alia has led to implementation of national programs for school with integrated meals, to mean that in Benin we have won the title of champion of the meals at schools and also education in technical training, as well as the organization of a national forum on meeting these challenges. That there are still many challenges which remain to be met, and with relatively weak results we see for learners on different levels, imbalances between boys and girls, and also between regions of the countries, and also external inefficiencies which affect the teaching system. This calls for a greater commitment from the government and the implementation of action to transform the system. That's why the government of Benin, with the participation of all parties concerned, has strengthened the setting up of inclusive, equitable, safe, and healthy schools, improve the quality of learning, lifelong learning, guaranteeing the development of skills for education and entrepreneurship, for work and sustainable development, to make available a sufficient quantity of teachers and of other skilled staff who are motivated, competent, aware of their social mission, including special needs teachers, and integrating digital matters into what is done in school, and also for the training of teachers. And finally, to elaborate and implement a mechanism for innovative financing which is used optimally, so that domestic and foreign resources that are mobilized for financing of education may be spent as effectively as possible. Benin would wish that a recommendation of our pre-summit could lead to concrete decisions for the New York summit, and to guarantee the right to education and the quality and usefulness of this in a sustainable way. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Education in Bolivia.
Many thanks. A very good afternoon to everyone. In the case of the plurinational state of Bolivia, education has been affected by the institutional setup that we have. Generally speaking, in 2020, we saw an ending of the school period in a responsible way, but we were then impacted by the pandemic, which we saw impacting the whole world. At that point, the first measure was devolution of the right to student by a new constitutional government in Bolivia, because I think the important thing here is to work in education and to see those who have been the most affected by these different events that I have set forth, and that have greatly affected or impacted our educational units. Starting with the government in 2021, when we recovered democracy, our democratic government has been dedicated to economic growth, health, and education, and the right to education as a response to the popular vote for a popular government. This is an action which continues in 2022 in the government's activities, with a project to arrive at the bicentennial in 2025 with quality and participatory and inclusive education involving all Bolivians of both genders. This is reflected in the joint actions undertaken to meet our government's goals, first of all, in education, which is to say that the activities undertaken and the results obtained in the Ministry of Education, emphasizing the recovery of learning with ongoing lifelong learning, with necessary measures taken for the quality of learning in different contexts in an integrated way, so as to arrive at educational quality which involves everyone, which is to say, starting with indigenous people, with rural populations that need to be decolonized, and to have a violence-free context in which to learn. Moreover, an intercultural form of education, which is also multilingual on the basis of an educational model which is socio-communal and which is productive, with the idea of going on building a form of education for all Bolivians. We thinking also of human development as a fundamental pillar of our socioeconomic development. We have an important role to play in a commitment to answer to the people, giving them quality education so as to have a decent life. For this reason, we are continuing to develop national and sectoral and territorial consultations so as to update the curriculum in a way that will allow people to go on strengthening in a second phase of the socio-communitary and productive model. There will also be incorporation of international cooperation, technological transfer, and capacity building for the transformation of the general context. We are also working on a strategic plan for the International Decade of Indigenous Languages 2020-2030, whose goal is to give greater value, conserve, and further develop indigenous languages. And in this framework, we have approved the law for the use of indigenous languages and their protection. This establishes also for the first time an Ibero-American Institute for Indigenous Languages to promote and consolidate cultural linguistic rights of indigenous peoples in Latin America and, of course, in our country. For this reason, we are working as a matter of priority on this so as to respond to the most vulnerable sectors of our society, who are our indigenous and rural populations. Many thanks.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of National Education, Teaching, Scientific Research, Training and Professional Integration in Comoros.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, ministers, honorable participants. It's a great honor to be here to share experience, in this case the experience that our country, the Comoros, have had, where we have experienced a very difficult situation, not simply because of the COVID-19 crisis, but also things that happened over the course of 2019 when we were hit by cyclones that had a strong impact on education, and then right after that, the COVID-19 crisis occurred, putting the country in the same situation as the rest of the world found itself, which led us to reflect and to think how we can make education more resilient, which allowed us to bring together the efforts also being made by our partners with our own, particularly UNICEF and the United Nations system via UNICEF, the World Bank, the French Aid Development Agency, and others, which helped us to save the school year by giving tablets to children so that they were able to go on following their education and not have the school year be lost. Before we had these consultations, the country undertook reform in the educational sector, and particularly in a digital context. So as, because we are an archipelago, to help with the natural catastrophes which do happen from time to time, to have a greater strengthening on the digital side so that all children in all areas of the country may benefit from education, even in crisis situations. But also in the system, you know that we wanted to strengthen technical and professional training. And here, we'd like to thank our partners, particularly the FD, which helped us to regenerate a system which was already in gestation, and we hope to have more results from that soon. The challenge here is to make the level higher, knowing that Comoros is a bilingual country using both French and Arabic, and so Arabic will have to be introduced into school beginning in primary school starting this year, and that's another challenge for us, and a partnership where we're going to have to improve the situation, because Arabic is the language used in nursery schools and in Quranic schools, so the fact to use that language in primary school as well, and then after that will allow children to have a better level in that language. The real challenge here is to increase the growth in public domestic finance, which is a great challenge, and particularly national consultations, which began in our islands and which will then have to be concluded at national level, will have to give rise to greater financing to national education so that all children may go to school. In the Comore Islands, we see that girls go to school more than boys, and we wish also to see that boys benefit more from education, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Could I kindly ask that the next group of distinguished ministers please be ready to come to the stage shortly. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Education, Higher Education and Scientific Research in Jordan.
I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to present important steps taken in my country, Jordan, to address the impact of COVID-19 on learning. Among those steps, we have established the Education During Emergency, a plan which has 3 phases: emergency, recovery, sustainability. After carrying out an assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on the education sector, we found out a noticeable learning loss, which 500,000 students, Jordanian and Syrian refugees, suffered from. We used technological tools and programs like Learning Bridges to accelerate learning and recover from learning loss. Just recently, we addressed inequalities and endorsed what is called Jordan Declaration in Inclusion and Diversity in Education, which include children with disability, Jordanians, and refugees. Putting inclusion and diversity at the heart of education post-COVID-19 is a must to leave no one behind, and also to address the transformation education agenda and to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Recently, more emphasis was done on curricula development as well as teacher training to enhance the changing of education policies and practices. This led us to have the opportunity to conduct consultation regarding Transforming Education Summit, addressing different thematic tracks such as safe learning, environment, financing education, and others. As for the public financing of education, the Jordanian government is doing its best to finance education and to direct funds to priorities in spite of the limited financial resources. However, support of the international donor is a must to cope with the continuous need of both the Jordanian students and the 140,000 refugee students. Finally, we work on empowering learners, partners, teachers, principals, and education officials in promoting implementation and monitoring relevant education tools along with the national and international commitments. We worked also on building inclusive schools that integrate technological solutions and online curricula and digital competencies of teachers and students to support their digital learning. Jordan is committed to quality education as a priority through investing in the preschool education, school education, and vocational education. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Education in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and an honor to be among you today, and it is my honor to convey to you the greetings of the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman ibn Abdulaziz, and His Highness the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, as well as the people of Saudi Arabia and their best wishes and aspiration for this meeting and for education around the world. Our discussion today on transforming education is rooted in the concept of learning. Without it, a student cannot gain any knowledge or skills, and in turn will not achieve their full potential for a human capacity development. Education systems are the conduit through which learning is delivered, and it is our responsibility as education leaders and advocates to ensure that the children, all children, have equitable access to quality learning opportunities that promote academic and socio-emotional well-being. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, through its recent education reform, affirms its dedication to promoting and supporting quality education for all students. The COVID-19 pandemic tested all countries' dedication to education delivery and reaffirmed the need to enhance the responsiveness and resilience of education to future crises and emergencies. During the pandemic, the Kingdom successfully launched 2 state-of-the-art online platforms that ensured education continuity to all of its people. The 2 platforms, Madrasati, Rawdati, as well as 25 satellite TV channels, launched offer synchronous and asynchronous distant education platform around the hour for all students from preschool to grade 12, including special education and continuing education. Throughout these efforts, the ministry was able to ensure education continuity and pushed forward with its fundamental education reform plans that were underway prior to the start of the pandemic. As part of the ongoing reform, the Ministry of Education adopted strategic policies to enhance education services delivery, student outcomes, and educational experience. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I trust that we all firmly believe that education comes at the heart of all sustainable development goals as a human right. Our role today is to reaffirm our commitment, make sure that we are on track in achieving SDG 4 and accelerate progress on education for the remainder of the decade of action. To achieve that, dedicated committees was formed in the Ministry of Education since 2016 to steer and monitor all efforts and initiatives geared towards achieving the targets of SDG 4. The Kingdom priorities through its evolving journey to transform education between now and 2030 vision includes assessing potential learning losses and gains, preparing and supporting teachers and school leaders, embracing distant and blended learning platforms, innovating in new learning approaches such as online and hybrid scientific labs. Thank you for your time. We welcome meaningful and productive discussion as we engage in the summit topics and set our sight on the way forward. Lastly, we eagerly anticipate elaborating on the 5 themes at the summit in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and to the other speakers. I will now please ask you to make your way off the stage. I would like to invite to the stage the distinguished members of, starting from the seat on my left, Spain, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Montenegro, Palestine, Qatar, and Somalia. Thank you. I'll list those again. Spain, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Montenegro, Palestine, Qatar, and Somalia. Could I kindly ask the ministers, Your Excellencies, to stick to the 3 minutes allotted time. Our next speaker is Distinguished Minister for Education and Vocational Training in Spain.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, ministers, dear colleagues. I'd like to thank UNESCO for holding this pre-summit. It's an opportunity for us to talk about the transformative power of education. When talking about Spain, we can talk about this new reform that can help us address the challenges of the 21st century and focus on the SDGs, in particular SDG 4. We responded quickly to the national consultations, and we've already got the first outcomes. First, continue to pursue the educational reform that highlights 4 aspects: developing skills, educate with equal rights and values, digital transformation, and promoting sustainability and well-being. Spain recently has passed a reform that encompasses all of these aspects, and I'd like to give you some examples. Second, we need to improve the teaching profession. We need to count on teachers. We need their support. In our countries, we have put in place a reform of the teaching profession. The aim is to value the profession and improve their training and promote their development throughout their career. It is essential to count on also universities. Third, the consultation reflects that we need to include youth, and we need to make our economies competitive. We need also to promote training and promote skills for work. And again, we will collaborate with universities. Spain has also passed a reform recently on vocational training that is something that, as a society, we are really focusing on. Fourth and lastly, we need to focus on quality lifelong learning. In Spain, with vocational training and university, we're creating different modules that will work for lifelong learning. We're also counting on businesses so that we can all continue to learn throughout all stages of our lives without leaving anyone behind. It seems fundamental to me that we also need to listen to members of societies and we need to listen to teachers. So we will continue to reflect on this. I hope that this consultation process will lead to outcomes that our president were able to share in the summit in New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is Distinguished Minister of Education and Minister of Higher Education in Kuwait.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سيدات والسادة الحضور.
In the name of God, the compassionate and all-merciful. Ladies and gentlemen, may the peace of God be with you. In the name of my country's delegation, I would like to stress how important this summit and this pre-summit are for my government. Given the crucial objective of ensuring good education and transformation of education. Ladies and gentlemen, it goes without saying that the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the entire world, has also had an impact on institutions, especially education institutions. But that has not prevented Kuwait from rising to the challenge given the importance of education. And so we have started to prepare to confront the challenges of the future, and we have set up a future-oriented plan. We have an education project entitled Promotion of Education for All, given that the pandemic was an opportunity to revise education curricula and training programs with a view to introducing innovation into education to ensure that we can continue our efforts beyond the end of the pandemic. And we are doing this on the basis of experience gained by other countries and other educational institutions elsewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of Kuwait has always had the objective of ensuring development, and we are working hard to achieve all of the objectives of sustainable development, the goals, and that is part and parcel of our development plan for the period through to 2035. Education is at the heart of all our efforts, and the very essence of this plan is to build up a high-quality human capital with people who are well-trained and able to contribute to our state's development. Ladies and gentlemen, Kuwait is committed to ensuring the highest possible quality level of education that is even enshrined in our Constitution. We have sought to ensure equality of genders throughout the education system from primary school through to higher education. We intend to give girls and boys equal opportunities. The education budget accounts for 14% of the national budget, financing thereby all levels of education. We also provide assistance to developing countries, providing students from those countries with scholarships and assisting in the deployment of education projects in such countries. We have provided loans and grants, facilitation payments to developing countries. Our country does this not only on the basis of international agreements, but we also pay close heed to the decisions taken by our head of state in this regard. The state of Kuwait seeks to be an exemplar for education, literature, and culture, and we certainly support UNESCO in the efforts that it is making to implement a common vision that will really result in the transformation of education by 2030. May the peace of God be with you.
And higher education in Lebanon.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank UNESCO for having given us this opportunity to participate in such a prestigious assembly on education.
Ladies and gentlemen, history, near and far, teaches us that Lebanon built its uniqueness on the exceptional quality of its educational system, which has always been and will remain the primary guarantor of Lebanese talent and brilliance. Lebanon has always gone through wars and turmoil over time. But for the last few years, Lebanon has been facing a series of unprecedented multidimensional crises and severe transformations, among which we can mention more than 1.5 million Syrian refugees, an unparalleled political, economic, financial, and monetary crisis, along with the COVID-19 pandemic and the horrific Beirut port explosion. However, despite this dark reality, Lebanon has taken up the challenge of preserving education. Faced with pressing and intertwined constraints, including the deterioration of the quality of life, the devaluation of teachers' salaries, and their exodus in search of better opportunities, the decrease in the resources of students' families, or even obstacles to the conduct of work in educational institutions. In this context, the Ministry of Education and Higher Education, with the international support and mainly that of UNESCO, has made every effort to develop quick and agile action mechanisms in order to mitigate the impact of the crisis on the educational sector, reduce damage, and ensure the continuity of education. And if we have partly succeeded, it is thanks to all these local and international efforts, but also, and above all, thanks to the dedication of the educational body, the perseverance of our students, and the determination of their families. Let me assure you, Lebanon has demonstrated a popular and institutional resilience that still amazes us to this day. Today, even though we are still suffering from the repercussions of the above-mentioned crises, we are doomed by hope, as one of our Arab writers said. Education is the lever on which we rely to preserve this hope and rethink the future of our country. Our vision, demonstrated in the 5-year strategy for general education and higher education, emphasizes our commitment to quality, equitable, and inclusive education. An education aimed at forming responsible citizens who work for the human, cultural, and socioeconomic progress in the country. The development of our human capital is a strategic issue for us, as it is our most sustainable resource. Based on this vision, and following the national consultations around the 5 thematic tracks of the Education Transformation Summit, we realized, as expected, that the paths to education transformation are almost the same everywhere, but at a different pace and with different priorities. And if our circumstances today are hindering our progress at the desired speed, the fact remains that Lebanon has already, and for a long time, anchored practices inspired by the Lebanese tradition of diversity, the continuous pursuit of excellence and modernization, openness and global citizenship, all of which are practices on which we can continue to build. As for the future, our ambition is to contribute, with all of you present today, to the emergence of a more humanistic education that puts the human at the center of their interests. An education that equips young men and women with skills that enable them to live and constantly reinvent themselves in a changing and increasingly complex digital world. An education that tames technological progress to bridge gaps which have deepened in recent times. An education that removes geographical, scientific, and cultural boundaries so that this humanity is worthy of its name. If it seems to you that what we aspire to seems too demanding or too difficult to achieve, let's remember the slogan that marked us all one day: be realistic, demand the impossible. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is Distinguished Minister of Education in Libya.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين السيدات والسادة الأفاضل رؤساء الوفود والوزراء وممثلي الدول والأعضاء وممثلي المنظمات الإقليمية والدولية، نحييكم كلكم باسمه وجميل وصفه بتحية الإسلام. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي أن أتوجه للمنظمات الحاضرة اليوم بجزيل الشكر والعرفان على
It is my pleasure to speak before representatives of the United Nations and the representatives of UNESCO and other international organizations, and to hear about all the efforts aimed at increasing partnerships and cooperation in order to achieve the goals we all aspire to, in order to re-ensure the continuity of education. Perhaps at the beginning, I will shed some light on the damage on children and students of the coronavirus. There has been a crisis of education which was already there in Libya and which presented many obstacles to young people even before the pandemic. Almost 2 million children and students were unable to attend their schools, and almost 500,000 youth were not able to attend their institutions of higher education. Despite the efforts deployed by my country during the closure of schools, which consisted of activating programs for distance education, there was an impact on the continuity of education and quality of education, especially in remote areas which do not have ICTs or electricity, and where family incomes are low. This has led to an increase in inequality in the context of trying to benefit from remote education, and especially in remote areas. The impact has been even bigger on children with disabilities and very young children because they were not able to participate through remote learning. Despite the huge challenges which the national education system faces and had faced even before the coronavirus, our educational institutions and the Ministry of Education have been committed to implementing ambitious and serious programs in order to reach a larger number of children and ensure that they enrolled in schools, and also to increase the pace of improving our educational system so that we will be able to be resilient when new crises hit. As an example, a number of initiatives were taken so that we will be able to recover from corona. During the health epidemic and afterwards, Libya took a number of steps in order to achieve recovery in the short and medium term. There were many positive actions, and we are committed to shoulder the responsibility of improving our educational system. The most important steps were the following: to reinforce the professional capacities of teachers so that they will have the skills required for the 21st century, which include the use of ICTs and achieving skills to manage classrooms and to teach. Also, to reinforce the capabilities of directors of schools, specialists in social affairs, those responsible for dealing with people with special needs, and those responsible for introducing technology. We will try to develop our schools in a way which fulfills international criteria. In many fields, we're dealing with capping the number of students in classes, for example, and teaching children with special needs, training sessions, and taking into account the ages of students in dividing up classes. When it comes to teaching in presentia and remotely, there are a number of challenges. One of them is that there is not always electricity, and there are many other problems as well. The ministry has put in place the National Project for Electronic Learning and Remote Learning in cooperation with regional and international organizations. And we will use appropriate mechanisms to move to electronic teaching, and we will put in place the infrastructure and engage in capacity building of our human resources. We also work on the health side by providing vaccines to all those working in the educational sector and to students, and also cleaning of the schools and sterilizing, and also putting in place the necessary budgets for the educational sector. And we will try to keep funding at adequate levels to try to improve teacher salaries in a way which is suitable to the economic and social context, and to pay more based on certain criteria, such as, for example, the geographical location of schools, the size of the classroom, etc. We will update our legislation concerning education by using a number of mechanisms. For example, we will make education compulsory starting in early childhood. And we will try to also make university education free in order to reduce dropout rates. A full review of school curricula for pre-university education, and to also concentrate on learning of emotional skills, for example. There are statistics about the educational system in Libya which will help us to respect international criteria, and we will try to fill some gaps in the training of teachers, especially when it comes to basic sciences, the use of ICTs in education. Also, we will put in place strategic plans and blueprints for the infrastructure of schools based on sustainable and innovative methods. Ladies and gentlemen, the participants. Last but not least, I would like to thank you for listening, and I would like to reassure everyone we are true partners to everyone. We will work together in order to achieve our common goals. In order to provide a safe educational environment to achieve our goals, and may the peace and grace of God be upon you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Education in Palestine.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it gives me great pleasure to address you on the pre-summit for transforming education. I would like to address first the situation in Palestine. In Palestine, we've been engaged for quite a while, for 3 years already, in a structural reform agenda that touches on the governance of the education system, the structure of the system. We're adjusting the structure so it's more agile, more responsive, more transparent, and more efficient. It also touches on curriculum. We're setting up a new national center for curriculum. Assessment, we're revising the way we do assessment for schools and for school exit and college entry, as well as the establishment of quality assurance system, because like higher education, public education requires that we agree on the outcomes, desired outcomes of education, learning outcomes, social, emotional, cultural outcomes. So we have set up a quality assurance unit in the ministry. We have focused on the decentralization, what we call prudent decentralization, supported by a major thrust on digitization, because digitization will support good governance and will make the system, again, more agile and more responsive and so forth. So in Palestine, we're pushing that, and the heart of this is the student. We always say for a long time that the student is the locus of the whole learning process, but we need to actually make this real. So we have a whole suite of measures and programs to actually underscore that the teacher will remain at the center. We have managed in different ways to engage our students in the transformation because we believe we cannot do it alone. We need to leverage a national partnership that will carry the transformation. And we have mobilized NGOs, CBOs, government agencies, universities, all universities in Palestine, teachers' unions, parents' unions, and student parliaments. So we have an inclusive national partnership that will carry the transformation. Besides, we're talking about the domestic financing. In Palestine, as you know, the situation is not normal, far from it. We're under occupation. Our resources are basically not under our control. The Israeli occupation controls most of the business, commerce, export, import, land utilization, water, and so forth. So it's important that we're innovative about availing resources for supporting education. And the particular reason in Palestine, or tilt, is that Palestine's education is unique in many ways because it is linked to who we are, the DNA of a Palestinian, the identity, the narrative, and the future. So we cannot risk not being able to support a sovereign education system. We have come up with a creative arrangement whereby we have the community adopt our schools. So we have a massive, large-scale school adoption program where the community actually took over, and now already 1,500 schools are taken care of by local philanthropists, business, community leaders for 5 years to come. We have made legislation on the education tax, so we multiply our return from tax, education tax, again to support domestic financing.
For the teaching profession, we have just passed a law that will actually elevate the status of teachers, moral, financial, administrative, and professional. And that's called نظام مهنة التعليم. That would be a historical junction, as a matter of fact. Now, in Palestine, the issue is, and actually for the whole summit, we have a situation. Now, you may say that countries will commit, and we will sign and commit. The problem is, you have externalities that are beyond your control. In Palestine, our commitment is solid. However, the limitations and impediments imposed by the occupation are hard facts and real on the ground, day in, day out. So when we talk about, for example, safe and inclusive schools, how can we do that when the Israeli army, settlers, are daily incursions and attacks on schools, teachers, and the school community? So I'm saying that it's really important to factor in externalities like that when you talk about national commitments to the SDG and to the transformation. Now, I would like to talk about something more general, which is the summit. I heard the interventions this morning and yesterday, and I actually believe that one of the major challenges is finding creative ways of factoring in the voices of children. Non-trivial, but doable. In fact, we have developed a toolkit called the Voice of Children Toolkit that will systematically inform the system about students' perspectives about their learning environment, different aspects of learning. What they learn, how they learn, the school environment, how safe they feel, etc. And the second issue is universality. I believe it is time to develop a core universal curriculum, of course with a margin for adaptability nationally, in exact sciences, natural sciences, IT, and moreover, one core curriculum on what we can call our common humanity. So planetary citizenship can actually be highlighted and can be mainstreamed globally through such a curriculum. I wish you all the best. I would like to reaffirm Palestine's commitment to the agenda and to the goals and commitments of the summit, and we will sign on that in September. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is Distinguished Minister of Education and Higher Education in Qatar. Thank you.
أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إنه لمن دواعي سروري أن أمثل دولة قطر في هذه المشاورات استعداداً لقمة تحول التعليم التي دعا إليها سعادة الأمين العام.
My country to this summit that was convened by the Secretary General. We hope that this summit will lead to a global movement to really transform education. We have had the honor to have hosted a preparatory meeting. This aimed to outline the challenges that we face. We also undertook national consultations with all stakeholders in the education sector. They led to recommendations that go as follows. There's a need to emphasize that we need to guarantee education and focus on learners. We need to include children with disabilities. And we also need to promote a healthy environment for children. It is clear at this stage that the COVID-19 pandemic really showed us how important it was to promote healthy environments for children and guarantee healthy environments. We want to support each and every learner. And to do so, we are using AI and technology. We also are insisting on the training of teachers. We need to support teachers. We need to listen to them. We need to provide quality training for them. They are preparing the future. Fourth, we need to enable teachers and educators to be able to prepare learners for the world of work. We need to make sure that we ensure lifelong learning for all. Last, Qatar emphasizes the importance of education throughout the world. This is a priority of the policy of our country. This is also in within the framework of development aid and our 2030 vision. We attach great importance to really focusing on children. In our development fund, we allocated aid to developing countries, to 70 countries, developing countries. This was to go towards providing quality education in developing countries. We also forged partnerships in various sectors. We granted aid to over 40 million children, and we've also supported refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, education is the roadmap for our country. This Transforming Education Summit will enable us to reach the objectives of this roadmap. I'd like to insist on Qatar's commitment regarding reaching these goals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Education in Somalia. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. As you are aware, Somalia,
Lord merciful and compassionate, as you know,
education system resulted in loss of infrastructure and human capital, fragmentation of approaches, and politicization of interventions and support for the sector. For more than 2 decades, due to the absence of effective government structure of 20 different curricula were used across Somalia, this has created a mixture of combating education systems based on a variety of languages, ideologies, and standards in their areas of influence, and the governmental forces have utilized the school system to promote their own extremist curriculum with the aim of sowing division, radicalization, our young people and recruiting them for their cause. Despite the many challenges encountered, Somalia has made tremendous progress in terms of the state recovery since the establishment of the federal system and signing of the provisional constitution in 2012. The Minister of Education, Culture and Higher Education has been enrollment and attendance of girls have been revitalized as and has succeeded in standardization the school system is establishing a unified curriculum and syllabus, and creating the foundation for the Somali national education system, which is improving the delivery of basic education services to our learners. Progress has also been made in the development and adoption of the key education policies and laws, the establishment of a national examination system, and the formulation of a treaty education. The current Somali National Development Plan highlights the importance of education as a key tool for development, and Somalia is fully committed to realize our SDG 4 commitments and upholding their right to education of every Somali child to the level and extent possible within our limited resources. Our new national president, Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, is himself an educator and very committed to this vision. However, Somalia still has a long way to go to transform the education sector and reach our goals of providing universal access to high quality, inclusive, safe, and well-managed education service. We appreciate the ongoing support and commitment of international partners to assist us in this regard. With the support of our development partners, my ministry continues to strive to achieve greater equality and access to education in Somalia, despite the gains made, social culture practice and discrimination hinder to enrollment and attendances of the girl and the children with disabilities in school. Girls are most likely than boys to be out of school, especially in times of emergency, and access to any educational opportunities are very limited for our children with disabilities who continue to experience it with disparate stigma and marginalization. We all know that teachers are the backbone of the education system, and teachers' effectiveness in the most important is predictor of students' learning. However, in Somalia, due to the decades of instability, there has been widespread loss of qualified teachers from the system, resulting in insufficient numbers of skills in our current teachers cohort. Professional testing in 2019-2020 shows that only 53% of primary teachers reached the minimum required standards. Last but not least, in the challenge of financing education provision, the Somalia ESSB 2022-2026 is budgeting over $400 million over a 5 years period. Of this, 76% is for recurrent costs. The Somali government has committed to allocate approximately 1/3 of this amount, with the rest being depending on our development partners, given the extent of the needs and the limited funding available. It is essential that any financial support for the Somali education sector is well coordinated and aligned with the ESSB and is delivering the best value for money. In the past, fragmented approaches to education have underdetermined the sector, and for this reason, we look forward to developing the international partnership compact which will strengthen our ability to align and harmonize all sources of funding toward delivering Somali national education priority. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your statements have been inspiring and give promise to an exciting lead-up to the Transforming Education Summit in September, and not least a prosperous path towards 2030. In the lead-up to the pre-summit, youth from around the world were invited to share their innovative and inspirational ideas on what they have done or would do to transform education. Before the next part of this session, we have compiled some of the videos young people sent us to hopefully remind us why we are here in Paris to exchange ideas and practices. For the next part, I will pass the floor to Sofia Bermudez, who will moderate the next portion of the program. Oh, I do apologize. Our next speaker is Distinguished Minister of Education for Montenegro. I do apologize.
Ваши превосходительства, позвольте.
Your Excellencies, please allow me to welcome you in my own name and in the name of the authorities of Montenegro. I'm very grateful to you for the invitation to be present here today. We certainly agree with the international community that the future of education is essential to rise to the challenges of the multiple crises that are buffeting many countries of the world and many sectors, including education. The planet, the functioning of democratic societies are confronted with ever-growing dangers. And for us to seek to achieve a peaceful and sustainable world, we really need education, especially given the tremendous changes that are occurring in socioeconomic spheres. Now, education must rise to higher standards. We need to have good standards, and let me give you the example. The lessons that we learned in the course of COVID have been taken advantage of with a view to ensuring a better system of education. We want to introduce technological innovations that will make it possible to ensure high-quality education even in crisis periods. And the cooperation between the European Union and the Balkan area from which I hail can certainly contribute to this through the Berlin process with the digitalization of programs for students and pupils at school. And the possibility for Montenegro to participate in the Global Summit will certainly contribute to our efforts with UNICEF's support to improve our education sector. And the analysis of that sector is essential. We seek to achieve inclusiveness, to make sure that our education sector is properly financed, and that all of this is done on the basis of long-lasting and sustainable reforms in the education sector. We had a very broad-ranging process of consultation, which has laid the groundwork for an overall reform, indeed, transformation of our education sector. And the national consultations that we had in Montenegro in preparation for this summit has really contributed to our better understanding of what we need to change in the education sector. We listened to all those involved, including teachers, parents, and the children themselves. Thank you.
Apologies for that error there. We will now watch the video where youth have contributed their ideas, and then we'll hand over the floor to Sofia Bermudez, who will moderate the next portion of the programme. Thank you.
Salami. I'm 24 years old. I currently live in the United Kingdom. Transforming education means empowering learners and preparing them for the future of work and planetary sustainability by mainstreaming education for sustainable development into our curricula. Education for Sustainable Development gives learners the values, skills, and agency to address the interconnected global challenges in the world. So it is very important that we make our curricula fit for the future of work so as to empower young people to be agents of change.
Hello, my name is Cody Freeman. I'm 30 years old and I'm here in Bangkok, Thailand. Transforming education means creating a world where LGBTQI+ youth are free. And we do that by having an inclusive curriculum, building spaces free from violence, bullying, and discrimination, and fostering networks of parents, teachers, admin, and policymakers in order to cultivate better mental health and a greater sense of belonging.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Coralie, j'ai 27 ans.
My name is Coraline. I'm 27 years old. Knowledge is available everywhere on the internet. Schools should therefore offer us more than that. They really should educate us in human values and social skills. We really need that. I'm thinking in particular of empathy, inclusion, resilience, everything that will allow us to be the best that we can, better to collaborate and better to work together. That is why I'm working to create workshops on these concepts to integrate all of what I have mentioned.
Hello everyone, my name is Niall Deng. I'm a South Sudanese refugee writer and community activist. I spent 11 years in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya and now attend college in Canada. For young refugees like myself, education is the most powerful tool that we can use to secure a more full and brighter future, not just for ourselves and for our communities. As we build momentum toward the Transforming Education Summit and ensuring that we achieve SDG 4 by 2030, let's commit to leaving no child behind and ensure that every child everywhere can have access to safe and quality education. Education is hope, empowerment, and progress. For every child, everywhere, a chance to learn. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is John. I am 13 years old. I am Korean, but I live in Tunisia. I am a homeschooler. So, how do I study at home in Tunisia? Well, I'm going to talk about the digital education. The cool thing about it is that people like me can access any resources if there's an internet. Thanks to digital apps, I can study with friends from other continents.
Hello, my name is Veronica Bella Hingis. People call me Bella. I would like to discuss teachers and the teaching profession. As a math teacher, I'm aware that to educate students, you design human beings. Right now, students are learners, but in the future, they are leaders, executives, professionals, or more. So it's important for them to develop learning agility. We must help them to prepare it and to improve that. How? By guiding them how to learn, adapt, unlearn, and relearn.
Pour pouvoir transformer l'éducation, nous devons nous...
To transform education, we have to make sure that our schools are protected from the threats of climate change. Extreme weather and natural disasters like cyclones, rainstorms are a threat, a constant threat to learning environments, especially in small island developing states. And so I urge you to act now for the children of tomorrow so that they may learn every day in a safe and healthy environment.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second part of the pre-summit ministerial roundtables. My name is Sofia Bermudez. I'm a young education advocate from Argentina. I'm a representative of the UNESCO SDG for Youth Network. I work at Education for Sharing as educational leader, and I'm also a member of the Argentine Youth Organization for the United Nations. It is an honor for me to be here and to have the incredible opportunity to hear about your proposals and your plans to transform education, because the future of an entire generation, our generation, is in your hands. In the Youth Forum yesterday and during the discussions today, we have heard several enlightening discussions on how to transform education. We have heard on how educational transformation needs to happen through the collective efforts of many people and with a diverse range of voices at the table. In this next segment, we will see how transformation of education will actually take place through concrete actions in countries through a series of ministerial segments. As you all know, the overall objective of the pre-summit is to harness the evolving discussions on transforming education, elaborating initial content and suggested actions for the summit, and generate greater momentum in the lead up to September. The ministerial roundtables provide a forum to share diverse perspectives of countries, especially those that have advanced in their national consultations, on the identified key elements and commitments to transform education. The exchange and discussions held are expected to inspire other countries to come forward with bold commitments and actions at the summit in September. When we talk about the transformation of education, we're talking about fundamental changes to the ways that schools and other educational institutions work, but also changes to the ways that educational opportunities are structured. Improvements to our existing systems will not be enough. We need a conversation about creating different education systems. Transformation must be an intergenerational project that leads us to something that is both new and a renewal. Youth must have a seat at the table, and their voices must not just be heard, but also be converted into concrete actions. I now invite the next speakers to take a seat here on the podium. These are the distinguished ministers of Tajikistan, Turkey, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Yemen, and Zambia, please. It is my great pleasure to welcome the first speaker for the second part of the session, the distinguished Minister of Education and Science of the Republic of Tajikistan.
السلام علیکم اشتراکچیان شریکان رشد مهمانان و همکاران عزیز уважаемые участники
Distinguished participants, guests, colleagues, to begin with, I would like to express very sincere thanks to UNESCO and to other development partners for the organization of this summit and the pre-summit and for giving me the opportunity to take the floor. The Ministry of Education of Tajikistan, together with the United Nations Organization and UNICEF and UNESCO, together with the regional office of the UN, organized a preliminary meeting in May of 2013 on education in Tajikistan and looked at our various commitments regarding education, and more than 200 representatives of various educational institutions, of civil society, of teachers, and of young people came up with a series of recommendations on the orientations to be followed in order to transform the education sector through to the period of 2013. We held other consultations on 5 key sectors or 5 key aspects of education: financing education, the profession of teacher and training teachers, transformation of education in a way to ensure safe schools that are well equipped technologically and that can contribute to sustainable development. High quality education is essential to prepare the future generation for contributing to sustainable development, especially in the sciences and in mathematics. It is also important to develop distance education, but that requires further development of information and communication technologies, something that we are working on at the present time. In the period through to 2025, we expect to equip virtually all schools with appropriate technologies. Together with our development partners, we are seeking to improve the quality of education as a whole, to ensure access to education for absolutely all children, and for the period through to 2030, we expect to improve many reforms in this regard. This is an essential factor for socioeconomic development in Tajikistan. Dear colleagues, we have a number of achievements in the education sector in Tajikistan. First of all, 20% of the national budget is devoted to the education sector. It has been noted in Tajikistan that there is now free of charge universal education for all children, and we are guaranteeing also gender equality in all of our schools and at all levels of education. We are seeking to bring in all girls to the general education system. The Education Ministry of Tajikistan is prepared to cooperate with all interested partners to achieve these objectives. In closing, dear colleagues, I would like to wish all of you a very fruitful pre-summit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of National Education of the Republic of Turkey.
Dear participants, dear ministers, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to express my pleasure to be here and to thank the UNESCO for hosting this international event to discuss the transformation issue of educational systems. Because we are limited to the 3 minutes limitation, so I will not read these notes, just speak giving some information about the Turkish education system and what we did to transform our education system. As you know, Turkey has a very large educational system involving 19 million students with 1.2 million teachers. It is a very large system. Turkey witnessed very challenging transformation and increased the schooling enrollment ratio from preschool to higher education. In terms of the massification of the education system, I can give some examples. For example, during the 2000s, our schooling enrollment ratio for 5 years school cohorts was around 11%, now beyond 90%. After finishing the massification of the educational system, we focus on 3 priorities. First of all, we try to increase the equality of education systems, involving all students, increase the accessibility of the high-quality education for all children, regardless of their social backgrounds. I also mentioned that Turkey is provide very important examples for all countries, because Turkey provides education service for the Syrian refugees under temporary protection coming from the civil war in Syria. As you know, Turkey has the largest refugees, immigrants coming from the Syria, Iraq, and the other countries. And Turkey has provided education for their citizens, children, on one hand. On the other hand, they provide education for the Syrian children. Secondly, we focus on the vocational education and training. As you know, all countries try to change vocational education systems depending on their labor market demands. And we also change our vocational education systems and involving new skills within the education systems. So we revised all curriculum depending on the labor market demands. Thirdly, we focus on supporting the teachers for their professional development. And this year, we published new law, professional law of teachers, focusing on supporting our teachers as life learners. We also increase the diversity of in-service teaching seminars, educations, covering all aspects of the humanity, not just the education. At the same time, the other cultures, the cultivation, digital literacy, and vocational proficiency. So, as you know, to transform education systems means that, as far as I see, to increase equality within the education system, at the same time, prepare teachers and students for the new challenges as COVID-19 pandemic or the other challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the distinguished Minister of Education and Science in Ukraine.
Distinguished ministers, colleagues, partners, it's a great honor for me to have short intervention at this highly respected pre-summit and take this opportunity to participate in extremely timely discussion of transforming education. I would also like to thank UNESCO for hosting this event. Like other United Nations member states, Ukrainian journey to global process of sustainable development. A national SDG strategic framework for Ukraine based on a principle, leave no one behind, was established with Sustainable Development Goals 4 as a top priority. Ukraine used it to systemically align public policies with SDG 4, aiming to promote and protect the right to education, ensure equal access to quality education as a basis for sustainable development. We have to admit that education sector was seriously affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. But since February 24, 2022, Ukrainian education is constantly facing another much more severe challenge, Russia's full-scale military aggressions. No doubt that our education system is severely affected by aggressors' atrocities. Russian troops continues killing civilians and bombing our cities and towns. As of today, more than 2,000 educational institutions have been damaged as a result of bombing and shelling. More than 200 of them are completely destroyed. Unfortunately, there are killed and wounded among students and educators. We still do not know how many of them our education system has lost because of Russian military aggression. The number of refugees from Ukraine reaches 7 million people. The number of internally displaced peoples is enormous. However, despite this emergency situation in education, Ukraine continues systemic transformation in the sector, trying to adapt public policies in new reality. So, today I would like to assure you that Ukraine remains strongly committed to the SDG 4 agenda and fully support transforming education action tracks. The grand-scale Russian war against Ukraine has forced all of us, including myself, to rethink the meaning of equitable and safe education. In 2019, Ukraine became to the 100 countries to endorse of the Safe School Declaration and has started its implementation. And it is day by day the Russia brutally violates provision of this document. The threats of catastrophic drop in students' enrollment in education, reduced access to education, threat to mental health of children and adults due to war become a new reality in the heart of Europe. Creating safe conditions for teaching and learning is at the moment not just a policy priority or political commitment, but the evident condition of survival of Ukrainian education. And the entire generation of Ukrainian children running a risk of having their education disrupted. So building a resilient system of education and training as a cornerstones of Ukrainian recovery in the post-war period and another key element of sustainable development. The emergency situation in education system of Ukraine has revealed the importance of flexible policies approaches, readiness for uncertainty, the role of strategic vision, as well as evidence-based actions. In wartime, Ukraine has succeeded in ensuring continuity to teaching and learning, and there is no doubt that is mainly due to efforts of our teachers. Through numerous challenges still should be tackled. We cooperated systematically with our partners and business to provide Ukrainian teachers with digital devices to deliver courses for their students. COVID-19 pandemic has facilitated the boost of digital technologies in Ukraine education. Due to well-developed e-learning infrastructure, we have a chance not to interrupt learning in wartime.
Excuse me, Minister.
Okay. Now Ukraine is fighting for its freedom and independence. However, despite the above mentioned, we are currently working hard on the recovery plan of Ukraine. Undoubtedly, the education restoration and transformation will be among the key chapters of our plan. Thank you so much. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to ask the next group of distinguished speakers to be ready to deliver their interventions shortly. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Preschool Education of Uzbekistan.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, dear ministers, and friends, colleagues, delegates from all countries. To begin with, I would like to thank the Secretariat of the Summit on Transforming Education for the organization and the coordination of such an important, prestigious meeting. I'm very pleased to greet you all here at this pre-summit to prepare the UN Summit on Transforming Education, which will take place in New York in September of this year. The demographic situation in today's Uzbekistan has inspired the national authorities to pay very close attention to education, because young people under the age of 30 represent 60% of the population, which means that in some 10, 20 years they will become the main age cohort in the country and will be raising our country to a new higher level of socio-economic development. And so the authorities of Uzbekistan understand that it is crucial to invest in human capital in order to ensure sustainable development for the country. The government of Uzbekistan, with UNESCO's assistance, held a national consultation in Tashkent on 23 June of this year. Now, we have an unique education system which provides education at all different levels, from the preschool through to higher education, with separate institutions involved. And so in the consultation, we had groups of young people, representatives of teachers, representatives of the education system, the private sector, NGOs, parliamentarians, journalists, and others all participated in the consultation. And we also had the national UN coordinator in Uzbekistan and representatives of UNICEF and UNESCO participating. Now, this national consultation was based on the principle of attracting people from all different sectors, concentrating, of course, on young people. And we looked at the following issues: ensuring full and complete access to education after all of those difficulties that we had because of COVID-19, using strategic levers to rethink education and make it appropriate for the 21st century, with a view to achieving the objectives of more sustained and regular financing of the education sector by the national government, with a view, of course, to improving our education indicators. Now, the future of education is seen as something that can move the country forward, and that was accepted by all participants, and various obligations were set out in a declaration covering 5 different areas taken into consideration at the Transforming Education Summit as well. Now, the broad-ranging reform of education is so important that we included 2 more thematic areas: raising the quality of education and training teachers in an appropriate way. Now, we're convinced that will make it possible for us to achieve many of our objectives by 2030. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the authorities of Uzbekistan, I can assure you that we are mobilizing all possible resources to achieve the objectives set out in the national declaration. so that we can achieve SDG number 4 and set the sad time of COVID-19 behind us. And so we appeal to all partners to cooperate with us in achieving those objectives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Our next speaker is the Distinguished Minister of Education in Zambia.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the government of the Republic of Zambia believes that education is the greatest equalizer in economic development and also recognizes the critical role that education plays in human capital development. Despite progress made in education provision at different levels, challenges remain such as inadequate numbers and low retention rates of qualified teachers, lack of appropriate teaching materials, including ICT infrastructure, and financial challenges, especially for vulnerable populations. In its quest to address some of these challenges, my government, which fully supports transformation of education, is already implementing bold and ambitious measures. We have commenced recruiting 30,000 teachers this year to lower the pupil-teacher ratio and thus improving the quality of learning. We have significantly increased school grants to cater for free education from early child care education to secondary school level. Thus, all school-related fees have been abolished as these grants meet the operational costs which were financed by the fees. We are constructing additional secondary schools to increase access at this level of education. We are also expanding bursary support schemes to all tertiary institutions, and we are also addressing challenges faced by the girl child. Government has expanded the Keeping Girls in School program, mostly through comprehensive sexuality education. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, coming to the summit, which will be held in September, we have been having consultations with various stakeholders, and so far, the following, not limited, have been the areas of transformation in our education sector. We are reviewing the 2013 education curriculum in view of lessons learned and to integrate emerging issues. We are trying to restructure the education system and align it to international trends and assessment processes. We also want to enhance teacher competences, recruitment, and deployment. We are also systematically integrating the use of information communications technology in teaching and learning, management and research through provision of innovative technology-based education and programs that have been derived from the lessons of the COVID-19 pandemic. Zambia, therefore, commits to complete the national consultations with the help of our cooperating partners. We are grateful to UNESCO and UNICEF in this regard. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you all the ministers who we have been privileged to hear today. You may leave the podium now, and please join me in giving the ministers a warm applause. As we still have time left in the session, we will now invite vice ministers and deputy ministers to speak, and we will invite them up to the stage one by one. The first vice minister to speak is the distinguished vice minister of Education for International Affairs in Iran.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have come together in this pre-summit to reflect on challenges such as war and conflicts, poverty, inequality, climate change, and COVID-19 that pose serious problems for world education worldwide, as well as the implementation of national plans and priorities. To address these challenges, we need to acknowledge the root causes properly. If our ideal is to create a decent life, avoid unilateral reading of globalization, and focus on moral values and a safe world, we should focus on moral values, honoring family, respecting the environment, justice, rejection, violence, and extremism, providing a moral, safe, and secure cyberspace, and media education as priorities for education transformation. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran recognizes the right to free public education as a right of all members of society, based on national policies, needs, and priorities. The Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran instructed the relevant authorities to devise the transformation framework of the country to strengthen the education system in order to realize quality and equitable education for all, open from apart from secular liberalism ideologies. In this regard, the fundamental reform document of education in the Islamic Republic of Iran was drafted and approved in December 2011, based on the philosophy of Islamic and Iranian education and devising an Islamic Iranian paradigm for change. From a quality perspective, the new education system aims to transform a memory-oriented system to one focusing on research, skills, creativity, and training, take into account national culture and religious values and education. We believe that a moral and a family-oriented education are basic elements in the transformation of education in the future world. The family is the first and the most essential educational institution in human societies. The smallest unit of society has, however, a prominent role in any educational transformation plan, and we believe that family strengthening initiatives are essential to supporting healthy child development and minimizing the risk of child abuse and neglect. Finally, in light of the fundamental reform document of education, which provides the most relevant responses for Iran's national educational system, we reserve the right not to abide by any provisions of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Education 2030 Framework for Action, and the Berlin Declaration on Education for Sustainable Development, which may contradict national priorities, regulations, legislations, and policies, or Islamic principles, or the cultural and religious norms, traditions, and values of the Iranian society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next distinguished speaker is the Vice Minister, Secretary General of Education from the Republic of Djibouti.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, may the
Peace and grace be upon his prophet and his...
Bonsoir. La transformation de l'éducation n'est
The transformation of education is not a choice. It is a need that our countries need to address. Djibouti, thanks to very high-level political engagement, has undertaken the education transformation since 2018. A national symposium and national consultations were held on the quality of education. However, the COVID-19 crisis has halted that dynamic, but thanks to a recovery plan based on the quality of education for all, the return to classrooms was possible thanks to an inclusive process. Learning losses were recovered. There was also a remediation and a revision mechanism that was put in place. Resilience was built through a strategy and for risk management for each school. We also developed digital. The recovery plan focused on ministers' commitment to come up with a strategic plan to transform education. This plan was 2021-2027. So the priorities of the education system were taken into account in all of their complexities. The education sector is a system. It's not a binary mechanism. So we need to think and approach education as a complex system. We cannot have a simple solution. In order to address this situation, we need a system-wide and holistic approach. For instance, we need to address the needs of rural people's needs in terms of education, and this requires multiple answers, creating facilities, organizing transport, helping teachers with mobility issues, and accessing digital technologies. So we need to harness these responses that have already been put in place. We also need to identify the difficulties, and now we need to identify the levers of transformation. Among these levers are valuing the profession, that is the profession of teachers, and supporting their training and improving their working conditions, ensuring that they have healthy and safe conditions. We also need leadership and innovation in schools. We need inclusion and equity when it comes to educating girls. We also need to address the specific needs of some children, and we need to adapt teaching methods to make them more inclusive. We need to skill children with values such as solidarity. Developing digital requires a global approach. Again, we need to ensure digital inclusivity, and we need to fund it. We also need to make all of this sustainable. We have put in place smart classes with digital technology. We have also carried out reflections on governance. Now, partners are contributing by up to 10%, and the government is participating into the financing of education of up to 90%. So there is a budget per program with a results-based approach. We are also engaging with public-private partnerships, and we're trying to raise awareness with our technical partners to promote investment. We have also put in place a mid-term expenditure plan and taken part in budgetary negotiations. So when it comes to governance and management, we need to undertake radical transformation to make our education system more effective and efficient. We must have a results-based approach to improve our system through developing assessment and improving accountability across the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Deputy Minister of Education for Scientific Affairs of Iraq.
In
the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and grace of God be upon you. The education sector is one of the 3 foundations for human development, and in order to achieve good health and a robust economy. Education is the 4th Sustainable Development Goal. As we all know, it's one of the 17 goals which were adopted by the General Assembly of the UN and which must be achieved by 2030. We are aware that through the transformation of our educational systems, we will be able to reverse the damages inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic and better prepare our teachers and our societies for the future. This requires huge efforts so that girls and boys may benefit from educational opportunities. The Ministry of Education in Iraq put in place emergency measures through the use of ICTs and with using 2 tracks to create a new educational environment because of COVID-19, one of the most important of which is to move from traditional education to digital education based on a number of criteria which supports non-simultaneous learning. This is something we concentrated on in the National Plan for Education and Higher Education in Iraq from 2022 to 2031. The 2 tracks were educational TV through educational programs and also opening up other channels for education. The 2nd track was through the remote learning through comprehensive national platforms and also YouTube and Telegram and other private platforms. Through this experiment in Iraq, we united a number of strengths. First of all, there was great support from learners for the transformation of education. There was also enthusiasm from teachers, especially young people, to reinforce their capabilities. And this is a great foundation for the transformation of our educational system. 4, through remote learning, we included some elements to improve the capabilities. For example, the questions bank on the national platform, which is part of the Ministry of Education in Iraq. There are a number of shortcomings which we took stock of. First of all, there is a lack of resources which would allow us to achieve a transformation quickly. There are problems, logistical problems related to internet. And there's some resistance. Some schools are attached to traditional learning methods, and there's a lack of equipment to use digital means. The Ministry of Education uses platforms and portals, digital portals. We are also using interactive books and trying to digitalize educational tools that can be used on iPads. So the ministry will support transformation by reinforcing the capabilities of those working in education. We will also review some of the legislation and rules for more flexibility to use digital education. This is one of the most important factors in the educational transformation. Also putting in place new partnerships. That was very quickly what I had to say in the time allotted to me. Thank you very much to UNESCO and to you, Miss. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellence. Our next speaker is the Distinguished Undersecretary of Ministry of Education of Oman.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السيدات والسادة السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lord the Merciful and Compassionate. The 2020-2040 vision focuses on the importance between the interconnectedness of all sectors and the need to develop the education system. We also need to develop social services and do everything possible to respond to and meet the SDGs. So in response to the invitation of the Secretary General of the United Nations to the September summit, in our country, we have undertaken consultations with over 250 participants of people that are experts in the field of education. They represent youth, civil society, the education sector, parents, and students. We cooperated with UNICEF, UNESCO, and other partners to come up with a shared national vision. The aim is to ensure the transformation of education. We made the most of the lessons learned from the pandemic. We have taken on board and taken into account the voices of youth. We need to listen to them and make sure they have a seat at the table and they must be in charge of their own future. We are doing the utmost to provide them with the necessary skills for work and life. We also are focusing on the role of teachers and educators. Their role was immense when facing the problems linked to the pandemic. So we have emphasized the importance of remote learning as well. We have attached great importance to teacher training. We are going to really leverage the experience of the pandemic in order to really take on board all the lessons that we learned. We are calling on all methods. We're using all different types of methods to really undertake this transformation. So we're taking on digital transformation, including in education, to ensure effective and efficient education. We are doing the utmost to include digital technology in education. We are also doing everything possible to install the adequate infrastructure. The government is also committed to financing the education system and the necessary mechanisms to encourage the private sector to take part in reaching these objectives. We are also upholding our international commitments our commitment to reach SDG 4. Furthermore, we have set out a number of indicators to forward the work towards sustainable development with the help of the UN and other specialized agencies, namely UNESCO. So we commend and applaud and are thankful for these efforts and this support to transform education with a view to 2030. Thank you.
Slovenia are in the room. Before continuing, please allow me to give a warm thank you to all our speakers. We have reached the end of an inspiring session, which has given promise to a productive lead-up to the Transforming Education Summit in September, and not least a prosperous path towards 2030. The statements we have heard have been inspiring and provided concrete commitments on how to strengthen education, how to steer the digital transformation, support teachers, prepare for a more sustainable future, and unlock the potential in every person to contribute to collective well-being and our shared home. I would also like to remind you that ministers participating in the pre-summit virtually have been invited to submit a pre-recorded video statement, which will be published on the summit of the session, on the summit's website. Thank you for all coming to this session, a session which I think has set the tone and paved the way towards the Transforming Education Summit in September. Thank you to our ministers for being here with us today at UNESCO. Let's join hands in applauding their commitment and hard work.